Have you ever wondered if the love of your life could reappear at the worst possible moment, carrying secrets that would change everything you believed about your past? Dr. Elena Mitchell adjusted her stethoscope around her neck as she reviewed patient charts at the fourth-floor nursing station of Seattle Children's Hospital. The rain drummed steadily against the windows that Tuesday morning, painting the city in those familiar shades of gray that locals had come to love. But the routine brought her comfort. It always had, these past 6 years. Each successful surgery, every accurate diagnosis, every life she helped save was another layer of protection she had carefully built around the shattered heart that once lived in her chest. The pediatric wing hummed with its usual symphony of sounds, beeping monitors, soft footsteps, the occasional cry of a frightened child, the gentle murmur of nurses offering comfort. Elena knew every corner of this floor, every room, every piece of equipment. She had learned to find peace here among the sick children she dedicated herself to healing. It was easier in many ways, to focus on their pain rather than her own. Elena had become one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the Pacific Northwest, not by accident, but through sheer determination to prove that she could rebuild her life from the ruins. She had done it brick by brick, sleepless night by sleepless night, pushing forward when everything inside her wanted to collapse. When friends had urged her to take breaks, to date again, to consider therapy, she had smiled politely and returned to work. Work understood her. Work never abandoned her in the middle of the night with nothing but a cold note for company. And she had succeeded. At 34, she had a thriving career that she had earned through countless hours of study and practice. She had a modest but comfortable apartment in Capitol Hill, decorated with the children's artwork and filled with the happy chaos of raising twins. And she had Emma and Ethan, her 2 beautiful children who were the center of her entire universe. Everything else, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the man whose face she sometimes still saw in her dreams, all of that she had locked away in a vault she never intended to open again. Dr. Mitchell, the investors arrived for the hospital inspection, said Nurse Patricia, arranging papers on the counter with her usual efficiency. Patricia had worked with Elena for 5 years now, had seen her through some of her worst days and best triumphs. Doctor, Hartley asked if you could accompany them through the pediatric wing. Something about showcasing our surgical success rates. Elena nodded, tucking the last chart into its designated slot with the precision that marked everything in her professional life. Of course. I will be right there. Her impeccably white coat reflected the order she had imposed on her life. Not a stain, not a wrinkle, every button in place. A meticulously reconstructed existence that left no room for chaos or unexpected surprises. She had learned that lesson the hard way, once upon a time, when she had been young and foolish enough to believe that love could conquer all obstacles. She walked down the corridor with firm steps, mentally rehearsing the attendance statistics and success rates she would need to present. The pediatric wing had achieved remarkable results under her leadership. A 96% success rate for complex surgeries, the highest in the region. 0 preventable deaths in the past 18 months. Recognition from the American Academy of Pediatrics. She took quiet pride in all of it, even as she sometimes wondered if she had sacrificed too much to achieve it. The corridor was familiar, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the antiseptic smell that had become as natural to her as breathing. She passed the door to room 412, where little Marcus was recovering from his appendectomy, and room 408, where baby Grace was finally winning her battle against RSV. These were her successes, her children in a sense different from her own twins. Every life she saved a small victory against the chaos of the universe. But when she turned the corner toward the main reception area, the world seemed to slow down around her. Nathan Blackwood was standing there in a charcoal gray suit and navy tie that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Those hazel eyes that had once promised her eternity and then abandoned her without a proper goodbye were scanning the room, and she watched as they landed on her with an almost physical impact. 6 years. 6 years since she had woken up on that cold December morning and found only a brief note of apology on his pillow. 6 years since she had stared at those carefully chosen words, trying to make sense of them, feeling her world crumble around her. 6 years since she had discovered, 3 weeks later, that she was pregnant and had decided, in a moment of pain-fueled clarity, that she would never look for him again. The air fled from her lungs as if she had been punched in the chest. Her hands trembled imperceptibly, but she hid them behind her coat, gripping the fabric with white-knuckled force. Not here. Not now, she thought, feeling her stomach turn with a violence that surprised her. Her heartbeat accelerated, hammering against her ribs like a prisoner desperate for freedom. She could feel the blood draining from her face, could feel her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. Nathan saw her. She watched it happen in slow motion, the recognition dawning in his eyes, the widening of his pupils, the leather portfolio nearly slipping from his suddenly nerveless hands. The color drained from his face as if he had seen a ghost. Or perhaps the past itself materializing before him, refusing to stay buried no matter how deeply he had tried to bury it. Elena. His voice came out hoarse, charged with a genuine shock she had not expected. Not Mr. Blackwood addressing a stranger, not the smooth-voiced businessman she had seen in magazine articles over the years. Just her name, spoken the way he used to say it late at night when they were tangled together in his sheets, vulnerable and raw. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, forcing a cold formality into her voice that took every ounce of professional training she possessed. Each syllable cost her a monumental effort, dragged from somewhere deep inside her where she kept all the feelings she refused to acknowledge. Inside, a storm of emotions threatened to destroy the facade she had built with such careful precision over so many years. Anger that he dared to appear here, in her sanctuary. Pain that his presence could still affect her this deeply. Resentment for every night she had cried herself to sleep, while he lived his glamorous life in New York. And something even more dangerous. A spark of that old love she had sworn she had buried forever, flickering stubbornly to life despite her best efforts to extinguish it. Dr. Hartley approached, completely oblivious to the electrical tension crackling between them like a gathering storm. The hospital administrator was a jovial man in his 60s, more concerned with donor relations than interpersonal dynamics, and he was beaming with the enthusiasm of someone about to close a major deal. "Ah, Dr. Mitchell, perfect timing. This is Nathan Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Ventures, and one of the principal investors in our new oncology wing. Mr. Blackwood, this is our best pediatric surgeon, the woman behind our 96% success rate. She is really quite remarkable." Nathan extended his hand mechanically, moving as if he were underwater, as if his body and mind had temporarily disconnected. When his fingers touched Elena's, a current of electricity ran up her spine with such force that she nearly gasped aloud. Memories flooded her mind without permission. Fingers intertwined beneath stars on Alki Beach, promises whispered in the darkness of his Queen Anne apartment, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and the newspaper scattered across the bed, and nowhere else in the world to be. She withdrew her hand quickly, as if she had touched fire, as if even that brief contact was more than she could bear. "It is a pleasure," she lied, her firm voice somehow betraying nothing of the chaos inside her. She was proud of that voice. She had practiced it in front of mirrors during those first terrible months, learning to speak without trembling, to smile without crying. The inspection proceeded like a refined form of torture, each step taking them deeper into the pediatric wing that Elena loved, each moment forcing her to exist in close proximity to the man who had destroyed her so completely. Every corridor they walked through, every word Elena was obliged to pronounce about procedures and protocols, was a blade cutting through the armor she had raised. She spoke about survival rates and innovative techniques while her mind screamed at her to run, to escape this man, to protect herself from the avalanche of feelings threatening to bury her. "This is our primary surgical suite," she explained, gesturing toward the observation windows without really seeing them. "We performed over 300 procedures here last year, with outcomes that exceed national benchmarks by a significant margin. Our post-operative care protocol has become a model for other pediatric facilities in the region." "Impressive," one of the other investors murmured. But Elena barely heard him. Nathan could barely pay attention to the technical explanations, though he tried. His eyes followed her every move, every expression, like a thirsty man staring at an oasis he was not allowed to approach. There was something different about her now, a strength and self-assurance that had not been there before, mixed with a guardedness that made his chest ache with guilt. The Elena he remembered had been open, trusting, quick to laugh, and even quicker to love. This woman was a fortress, beautiful and imposing and surrounded by walls so high he could not see over them. When they finally dismissed the other investors and hospital administrators, watching them file into the elevator with handshakes and promises of follow-up meetings, Nathan gently held her arm as she turned to leave. The touch was light, almost pleading, and Elena felt it like a brand. "Elena, we need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about," she replied, releasing her arm with a sharp pull that left no room for negotiation. The coldness in her voice could freeze the entire Puget Sound, and she meant for it too. She was not the naive girl he had left behind. She had learned to protect herself, and she would not hesitate to use every tool at her disposal. "Please. 5 minutes. I am begging you." There was genuine desperation in his eyes, something Elena had never seen before, not even when they were together. He had always been so confident, so self-assured, so certain that the world would bend to his will. But now he looked lost, shattered, like a man who had just realized the magnitude of his own mistakes. Against her better judgment, against every instinct screaming at her to walk away, she led him to an empty conference room at the end of the hall. The room was sterile and impersonal, with a long table and uncomfortable chairs and windows that looked out at the gray Seattle skyline. Rain still streaked down the glass, matching the tears she refused to let fall. She closed the door and crossed her arms, keeping a safe distance between them. The entire length of the conference table stood between them like a demilitarized zone, and she intended to keep it that way. "Speak." Nathan ran his hand through his dark hair, a gesture she recognized from moments of extreme nervousness. She had seen him do it before exams, before important meetings, before the first time he told her he loved her. The familiarity of it hurt more than she wanted to admit. "I never wanted to leave you. You need to believe that." "Believe?" The word came out like a bitter laugh, sharp and hollow and devoid of all humor. "You left me a note, Nathan. A cold, impersonal note saying you were not ready for commitment, that your career came first, that you needed space to figure out who you were. And now, 6 years later, you want me to believe what exactly? That the note was a joke? That you were under some kind of spell? Please, enlighten me. My mother lied to me." He said it quietly, his voice breaking on the words in a way that made Elena's carefully constructed walls tremble. "She told me that you had terminated the pregnancy and that you wanted distance, that I was disrupting your career plans. She showed me fake messages, forged documents that looked like they came from you. I was young and stupid, and I believed her." The ground seemed to open beneath Elena's feet. She gripped the edge of the conference table, feeling suddenly nauseated, the room spinning around her in a way that had nothing to do with physical illness. "Our child?" The words came out as barely a whisper. Nathan's eyes widened with confusion and then horror as understanding dawned. His face went pale, then gray, then almost green. "You were pregnant? It was true? My mother told me you had ended it, that it was all a mistake, that you never wanted to be a mother. She forged everything, manipulated me into believing that you had moved on, that you wanted nothing more to do with me, or any reminder of what we had." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena felt tears burn in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not after everything. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. not when he had already broken her so thoroughly once before. "Get out," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Elena, I did not know. Please believe me." Nathan took a step toward her, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "My mother told me it was over, that you had made your choice. She forged everything, emails and text messages, and even a letter that looked like your handwriting. When I tried to look for you months later, you had moved, changed your phone number, erased all traces of yourself. I hired a private investigator, but you had disappeared so completely it was like you had never existed. Get out." Elena's voice echoed through the room, raw with pain that had been buried for 6 years. Her vision blurred, her chest feeling like it was being crushed by an invisible weight. 6 years of reconstruction, 6 years of building walls, and in minutes everything was collapsing around her like a house of cards. Nathan took a step closer, ignoring her command. His face transformed by emotions she could not read. "I have a child? A son or daughter?" The words escaped before she could contain them, before she could think through the consequences, before she could protect herself or her children from what this revelation might mean. Children. Twins. Nathan staggered backward, as if he had been punched in the chest by an invisible fist. His legs weakened, and he sank into one of the conference chairs, his face transformed by a devastating mixture of shock, joy, and pain. "Twins," he repeated, as if testing the reality of the words in his mouth, as if saying them aloud might make them either more real or prove them to be a dream. The tears he had been holding finally ran down his face. "I have 2 children, and I have missed 6 years of their lives." Elena watched his collapse, fighting against the impulse to console him. Part of her, the part that had never stopped loving him despite everything, wanted to believe him, wanted to cross the distance between them and hold him as he cried, wanted to welcome this shared pain and find comfort in it. But the other part, the part that had survived alone, that had endured sleepless nights with 2 crying babies while juggling medical school, that had faced judgment from colleagues and loneliness that sometimes felt like drowning, that had made impossible choices every single day, that part demanded caution. That part had learned the hard way that hope could be the most dangerous weapon of all. "Do not expect me to feel sorry for you," she said, her voice sharp as ice, cutting through the emotional fog that threatened to overwhelm her. "I raised Emma and Ethan alone. Every fever, every nightmare, every first step, every first word, alone. While you were living your life in New York, building your empire, attending galas and giving interviews and dating models, I was here in Seattle, working double shifts to pay for daycare and medical bills and everything else that comes with being a single mother of twins. I want to meet them." Nathan raised his face, determination slowly replacing the shock. "I want to be the father they deserve, that I should have been from the start. This is not about what you want." Elena's voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady, and she hated herself for showing that weakness. "It is about what is best for them. And you appearing out of nowhere 6 years later is not exactly a stability plan. They have a routine, a life, friends at school. They do not even know they have a father. Then give me the chance to try. Please." The vulnerability in his voice was so raw it hurt, cutting through her defenses in a way that anger and excuses never could have. "I will end things with Victoria today. I will confront my mother. I will do everything right this time." Elena blinked, caught off guard by an unfamiliar name. "Victoria? My fiancé, or ex-fiancé after today." Nathan's voice was bitter with self-recrimination. "An arrangement my mother orchestrated, a merger of families and fortunes, designed to strengthen the Blackwood position in certain industries. I never loved Victoria. I tried to, for a while, thinking it might help me move on. But how could I, when my heart always belonged to you?" The words might have sounded romantic in another context, in one of those novels she used to read before she became too exhausted for anything but sleep. But here, in this sterile conference room with rain streaking the windows and years of pain between them. They just brought more confusion. Elena felt the weight of 6 years of decisions, of nights spent crying into her pillow, of love divided between two small beings who were half her and half the man who had abandoned her. "I need to think," she finally said, exhausted by the emotional storm that had swept through her in the span of an hour. "This is not about us, Nathan. It is about Emma and Ethan, and I will not let anyone hurt them. I am their father," he said, not as a threat, but as a statement of undeniable truth. "And I will prove that I deserve to be in their lives, even if it takes the rest of my life." 2 weeks passed since the reunion. 2 agonizing weeks during which Elena barely slept, replaying every word of their conversation, questioning everything she thought she knew about the past 6 years. 2 weeks during which Nathan sent flowers that Elena donated to hospital patients, letters she burned without reading, and gifts she returned with cold efficiency. She would not be bought. She would not be charmed. She had worked too hard to protect her heart to let him waltz back in with expensive gestures and pretty words. Megan, her sister, had come up from Portland to offer support, staying in the spare room and helping with the twins while Elena tried to process everything. "You cannot keep him away forever," Megan said one night after the children were asleep. "If what he says is true about his mother, then he is as much a victim as you are." "I do not care about his victimhood," Elena had replied, though even as she said it, she knew it was not entirely true. "I care about my children. Your children," Megan said gently, "are also his children, and they have a right to know their father just as he has a right to know them. I know you are scared. I know you are hurt. But think about what you would want if you were in his position." Elena had not answered. She did not have an answer. The situation was impossible, a tangled mess of lies and pain and years of separation that could not be undone by a single conversation in a hospital conference room. But when Nathan appeared at the door of her Capitol Hill apartment on a sunny Saturday morning, holding 2 remote-controlled cars still wrapped in their packaging, and with hopeful eyes that reminded her painfully of Ethan's expression on Christmas morning, she did not have the courage to close the door. The twins were watching cartoons in the living room, their laughter floating out to the hallway. Megan had conveniently decided to take a long walk, leaving Elena alone to face this moment. "I just want to meet them," Nathan said quietly. "I will not say anything about who I am. I will not confuse them. I just want to see them, to hear their voices, to know something about the children I should have raised." Elena looked at him for a long moment, at the hope and fear warring in his expression, at the expensive cars he held as if they were sacred offerings. He had shaved, she noticed, and his suit had been replaced by jeans and a casual sweater. He looked younger, more like the man she remembered from 7 years ago, before everything had fallen apart. "Mommy, who is it?" Ethan came running, his dark curls bouncing with each step. At 6 years old, he was pure energy and curiosity, always moving, always asking questions, always finding the joy in every situation no matter how mundane. Elena felt her heart squeeze painfully when she saw Nathan's expression as he looked at the boy. The similarity was undeniable. The same hazel eyes, the same face shape, the same crooked smile when curious about something new. It was like looking at a photograph of Nathan at the same age. Nathan dropped to his knees, reaching the boy's height. Silent tears flowed down his face before he could stop them, and he did not even try to wipe them away. "Hi, buddy. My name is Nathan." Emma appeared behind her brother, cautious and observant as always. She studied Nathan with the same serious expression she used when working on her drawings, analyzing every detail before committing to any reaction. She was the quieter one, the thinker, the child who watched and processed before acting. Where her brother was fire and movement, Emma was still water and depth. "Why are you crying?" "Because I am very happy to meet you," Nathan said honestly, his voice choked with emotion. "I have waited a very long time for this." Elena observed the scene from the doorway, her resolution to drive him away melting like morning fog under the Seattle sun. Seeing the children look at Nathan with innocent curiosity, seeing the genuine vulnerability of a man confronted with what he had lost, it was like a crack appearing in the armor she had built around her heart. Just a small crack, but enough to let a sliver of light through. Enough to make her wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, things could be different this time. The first meetings were tense, carefully orchestrated by Elena to minimize any potential damage. Nathan visited on Saturdays, always bringing something small, always respecting the limits she had set. No overnight visits, no promises about the future, no confusing the children about what this meant, no declarations of fatherhood until she decided the time was right. He played with them at Cal Anderson Park, pushing them on the swings, helping them build sandcastles in the play area. He listened to their stories about school and friends, about their favorite teachers and their least favorite vegetables. He learned that Ethan loved dinosaurs and wanted to be an astronaut, that Emma preferred mermaids and dreamed of becoming an artist. He discovered their favorite foods: macaroni and cheese for Ethan, pizza with mushrooms for Emma, and their fears: thunderstorms for Ethan, the dark for Emma. "I bought books about fatherhood," he told Elena one Saturday while the children played on the jungle gym. "I have read 12 of them so far. I know it is not the same as actually being there, but I wanted to understand what I missed, what they needed at each stage, what I should have been doing all along." Elena had no response to that. What could she say? That she appreciated his effort, that it did not matter because nothing could give back those lost years. Both were true, and neither felt adequate. And slowly, week by week, Saturday by Saturday, the walls between them began to show more cracks. Nathan proved to be consistent, present, dedicated in a way that surprised her. He canceled business trips to New York so as not to miss his visits. He remembered everything the children told him, bringing Ethan a book about Mars after the boy mentioned wanting to visit the red planet, giving Emma a set of professional watercolors because she had complained that her school paints were too watery. Emma, always the more thoughtful and observant of the twins, was the first to ask the question Elena had dreaded. She asked it on the 4th Saturday, while they were eating ice cream at Molly Moon's in Wallingford, the children's faces smeared with chocolate and salted caramel. "Are you our father?" The question dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward in every direction. Ethan looked up from his cone, suddenly interested, his usual chatter stilled. Nathan looked at Elena, silently asking permission, his face a mixture of hope and terror. She felt her heart in her throat, knowing that this moment would change everything, that there was no going back from whatever answer was given. She thought of all the times the children had asked about their father. She had always given vague answers, saying that he lived far away, that he was not able to be with them, that sometimes things did not work out the way people planned. She had never lied, exactly, but she had not told the truth either. And now the truth was sitting across from her, waiting to be acknowledged. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes," Nathan replied softly, his voice catching on the single syllable. "I am." "Where were you?" Ethan asked bluntly, his 6-year-old directness cutting through any possibility of comfortable euphemisms. His ice cream cone was forgotten, dripping onto his hand. Emma nodded, clearly wanting the same answer, her serious eyes fixed on Nathan's face. Nathan took a deep breath. "I was far away, very far away. I made a mistake, and I was not here when I should have been. But now I am here, and if you will let me, I want to stay, always." The twins exchanged one of their silent looks, that wordless communication that only twins seem to share. They had been doing it since before they could talk, a language of glances and expressions that Elena had never quite been able to decode. Then Ethan smiled, a bright and uncomplicated smile, and climbed into Nathan's lap. Cool. Now I have a dad too, just like Marcus at school. Elena watched from across the table, her emotions a tangled mess she could not even begin to unravel. Part of her was furious that it was so easy, that 6 years of absence could be forgiven with a few Saturday visits and remote-controlled cars. That her children could accept this stranger as their father when she had spent years being both parents to them, filling every role, being everything they needed. But another part, the part that had always wanted her children to have a complete family, the part that remembered how it felt to have her own father there for every milestone, felt something dangerously close to hope. The following weeks brought more changes, faster than Elena had anticipated. She found herself looking forward to Saturdays in a way she did not want to examine too closely. The children's excitement was contagious. Their constant chatter about Daddy said this, and Daddy thinks that becoming the soundtrack of their daily lives. Elena watched from her kitchen window one sunny afternoon, while Nathan taught the children to fly kites in Volunteer Park. Ethan's laughter echoed through the autumn air, bright and unrestrained, and even Emma was smiling, something rare for her more reserved daughter. The three of them looked like a family, a real family, and the sight made Elena's heart ache in ways she could not quite understand. You still love him. Her sister Megan had returned for another visit, and was now standing beside her, watching the same scene through the same window. I do not know what I feel, Elena admitted, stepping away from the glass as if distance could protect her. Anger, hurt, fear. But when I see him with the children... You see them happy, Megan added gently. And you feel guilty for considering depriving your children of this happiness. That was exactly it. The guilt was a constant companion now, a weight she carried alongside all the other weights. Night after night, Elena tossed and turned in her bed, struggling against conflicting emotions that refused to resolve themselves. Nathan had proven to be everything she had told herself he could never be. Consistent, present, dedicated, loving. But what if he disappeared again? What if his mother's manipulation found new ways to separate them? What if Elena allowed herself to feel again only to be destroyed once more? She had barely survived the first time. She was not sure she could survive a second. Mommy. Ethan burst through the front door the following Saturday, his eyes shining with barely contained excitement. Daddy said he will take me to see real airplanes at the Boeing factory. Can I go? Can Emma come too? The word hit Elena like lightning. Daddy. It still startled her every time, even after weeks of hearing it. When had that happened? When had Nathan stopped being Nathan and become Daddy? Only if you want to come along, Nathan said from the doorway, holding Emma's hand. His eyes found Elena's, and she saw hope in those hazel depths. The same hope that had once made her believe in happy endings, back before she learned how easily those endings could be shattered. I would like to spend more time with all of you. The invitation was simple, but loaded with meaning. Elena saw it for what it was, not just an offer to visit a factory, but an invitation to become a family, to try again, to take a risk that terrified her more than any surgery ever had. She felt fear, a paralyzing fear of returning to being that girl in love who had had the whole world ahead of her only to watch it fall apart. But she also felt something else, something that felt suspiciously like hope trying to push through the cracks in her walls. I will think about it, she whispered, looking away. That night, after Nathan left and the children were finally asleep after much protesting, Elena sat on the couch and cried. She cried for the girl she had been, innocent and trusting. She cried for the woman she had become, strong but scarred. She cried for the children who deserved to have a father, and for all the years they had lost. She cried because her heart had treacherously begun to make room again for Nathan Blackwood, and she did not know if she had the courage to survive another loss. Across the city, in a penthouse apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, a very different kind of emotion was brewing. Victoria Ashworth stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the lights of Seattle glitter against the dark water, her face contorted with barely suppressed fury. Her private investigator had just delivered his latest report. Photographs. Nathan in the park with two dark-haired children. Nathan at an ice cream shop, laughing at something one of them had said. Nathan looking at a woman, a dark-haired woman in casual clothes, with an expression Victoria had never seen him direct at her in their 3 years of engagement. 3 months since he had ended things between them. 3 months of social humiliation, of whispered gossip at charity events and country club luncheons, of pitying looks from the women who had once envied her. Everyone knew. Everyone was talking. Victoria Ashworth, jilted by Nathan Blackwood for some nobody surgeon with illegitimate children. That insignificant doctor, Victoria spat, throwing her champagne glass against the wall. The crystal shattered in a satisfying explosion, champagne dripping down the white wall like tears. She stole my future. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Margaret Blackwood stepped out, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour, her posture rigid with the same fury that burned in Victoria's eyes. She moved through the penthouse with the ease of familiarity, accepting the glass of wine Victoria immediately poured for her. I see you have also discovered my son's little secret. How can he throw everything away? Victoria gestured at the photographs now spread across her coffee table, damning evidence of a life Nathan was building without her. We had plans, the merger of our families, the political connections, everything. Your son was supposed to be a senator by 40. I was supposed to be a senator's wife. And now he is playing house with some pediatric surgeon and her brats. Those children are my grandchildren. Margaret's voice was cold, controlled, each word precisely measured, which makes the situation considerably more complicated than I would like. Victoria paused, reassessing. So that is why you are here. You want them back. You want control. I want my son to remember his responsibilities to this family. Margaret settled into an armchair, crossing her legs with elegant precision. 6 years ago, I removed that woman from his life. I thought he would move forward, find someone appropriate, focus on the family business and the political future we had planned. But now she has reappeared with these children, and Nathan is completely bewitched. He speaks of nothing else. He has canceled 3 board meetings and 2 fundraising dinners because he did not want to miss his Saturday visits. How exactly did you remove her before? Victoria sat across from her, suddenly very interested. Margaret had always been formidable, but Victoria was only now beginning to understand just how far that formidability extended. Margaret waved her hand dismissively. Fake messages, forged documents. I hired someone to create an entire false narrative. I convinced Nathan that she had terminated the pregnancy and wanted nothing more to do with him, that she found his attention suffocating, his expectations unrealistic. It worked perfectly until now. He mourned for a while, then accepted what I told him and moved on. Or so I thought. A cruel smile formed on Victoria's lips. Then you know how to destroy people. People who threaten what is ours. Yes. Margaret's eyes were as cold as polished marble, reflecting nothing of the warm lighting in the penthouse. And that doctor threatens my control over my son and my grandchildren. If she continues in their lives, I will never be able to mold those children as they should be molded. They will be raised with her mediocre values, in her mediocre apartment, attending mediocre schools, instead of understanding what it means to be a Blackwood. What if she disappeared in a different way? Victoria suggested, refilling both their glasses with wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. An incompetent doctor, for example. Someone who committed gross medical negligence and lost the right to practice medicine. Lost everything. Margaret raised an intrigued eyebrow. Continue. Without a career, without money, without professional standing, how would she support 2 children? Victoria's voice grew more animated as the plan took shape. Nathan would certainly seek custody, and you, as a concerned grandmother, could intervene. You could offer the children everything their mother cannot. Private schools, trust funds, a future. The legal system does tend to favor financial stability in custody decisions, Margaret acknowledged. And you, I have a friend who specializes in creating problems for people. Victoria smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Documents, witnesses, whatever we need. Dr. Mitchell's medical record at that hospital is spotless, but records can be changed. Witnesses can be created. By the time we are finished, no one will believe she is fit to care for a houseplant, let alone 2 children. And you would be free to win back Nathan when he is vulnerable, Margaret added, raising her glass in a mock toast. A man trying to be a single father to twins he barely knows. He would need help, guidance, a partner who understands the demands of his position. Exactly. The 2 women clinked their glasses together, sealing a sinister pact in expensive crystal and aged wine. Neither felt remorse. For Margaret, it was about control and power, about the Blackwood dynasty and the political future she had planned for her son since the day he was born. For Victoria, it was pure revenge, dressed up in practical considerations, but fueled by wounded pride and thwarted ambition. And Elena, innocent and dedicated to saving lives at the hospital, still trying to navigate her complicated feelings about the man who had returned to her life, had no idea of the storm that was forming on the horizon. The following Tuesday started like any other. Elena arrived at the hospital at 7, reviewed the day's surgical cases, and drank her bitter coffee in the doctor's lounge while catching up on the night's events with the outgoing shift. For the first time in years, she had allowed herself to feel something resembling happiness. The constant knot of anxiety in her chest had loosened, if only slightly. Nathan had proven himself week after week. The twins were flourishing with his presence in their lives. And Elena had begun to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, she could allow herself to trust again. She had even started thinking about the Boeing factory trip. Maybe she would go. Maybe it would be good for all of them. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Dr. Mitchell, the hospital board needs to see you immediately. The secretary's voice broke through her thoughts, and Elena looked up to find the woman pale-faced and trembling. Something in the urgency, in the barely concealed fear in her eyes, was wrong. Very wrong. Elena's heart accelerated as she walked through corridors she knew as well as her own home. The same corridors she had walked thousands of times, comforting parents and checking on patients and consulting with colleagues. But now they seemed foreign, threatening, the fluorescent lights harsher than before, the walls closer. In the boardroom, she found Dr. Hartley, 2 representatives from the Washington Medical Commission, and a woman she did not recognize. The woman had silver hair and cold eyes, and a briefcase that probably cost more than Elena earned in a month. A lawyer. The realization hit Elena like a physical blow. Dr. Mitchell, we have received a serious complaint. Dr. Hartley could not meet her eyes, and that more than anything else told Elena how bad this was. Medical negligence in the case of patient Sophie Martinez, admitted 7 months ago. The world spun around her. Sophie Martinez was a 6-year-old girl with a complex congenital heart condition. Elena had personally conducted the surgery, a delicate and complicated procedure that had saved the child's life. Sophie was recovering beautifully, already back to running around the playground like any other little girl. Elena had seen her just 2 weeks ago at a follow-up appointment, had watched her laugh and play in the waiting room, had told her parents that their daughter was going to be just fine. This is impossible. Sophie is fine. She is recovering perfectly. There must be some mistake. We have documents showing the administration of incorrect post-operative medication. The unknown lawyer pushed papers across the table, her expression professionally neutral. Wrong dosages that could have been fatal. In addition, there are records indicating that you operated while under the influence of alcohol. The words hit Elena like physical blows. That is a lie. That is an absolute lie. She grabbed the documents, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. The papers looked official, bearing her signature, but she had never prescribed those dosages. She knew exactly what she had prescribed, had triple-checked everything as she always did. And alcohol before surgery? She had not touched a drink in years, not since the twins were born, and every moment of clarity became precious. She barely drank at all anymore. "The evidence is substantial, Dr. Mitchell." One of the commission representatives spoke, his voice devoid of sympathy. "There are witnesses who saw you drinking at a bar near the hospital before going on duty. Nurses who confirm that incorrect dosages were administered under your direct orders." Elena felt the floor collapsing beneath her. Someone was framing her, manipulating evidence, creating a fiction detailed enough to destroy her career and her life. "I need to speak with a lawyer. This is a setup. Someone is deliberately trying to destroy me." The representatives exchanged glances, and Dr. Hartley finally looked at her, his face filled with genuine regret. "Until the investigation is complete, your medical license is suspended, Dr. Mitchell." "I am sorry. My hands are tied. The evidence is too serious to ignore. You understand that the hospital has no choice." She left the room, staggering, the walls closing in around her. Her vision tunneled, her breathing shallow and fast. This could not be happening. After everything she had built, after everything she had survived, it could not end like this. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Nathan, who had come to the hospital to take her to lunch as they had planned just 2 days before. He was carrying flowers, white roses, her favorite, and a smile died the instant he saw her face. "What happened?" "They accused me of negligence, suspended my license." The words came out in a broken whisper, and she did not resist when he pulled her into his arms. "Nathan, someone forged documents, bought witnesses. Someone wants to destroy me." Nathan's expression hardened, his jaw tense, his eyes darkening with an anger she had never seen before. "My mother, and probably Victoria." The news spread like wildfire through channels both official and unofficial. Sensationalist headlines appeared in local papers and on medical gossip websites within days. Drunk surgeon, endangered child. Negligent doctor, suspended. Social media exploded with cruel judgments from people who had never met Elena, who had never seen her dedication, who knew nothing about the real story. Every word was a knife. Every pitying look from former colleagues was a humiliation. Parents of patients she had saved refused to speak in her defense, afraid of being associated with the scandal. Without her license, without her salary, Elena's savings began to deplete rapidly. Nathan offered financial help, but she refused, too proud to accept, too afraid of appearing dependent on a man who had already abandoned her once before. What if he left again? What if she allowed herself to rely on him and then found herself alone once more? She sold her car, the reliable Honda that had carried her and the twins through years of early morning commutes and late-night emergencies. She cut expenses to the bone, canceling subscriptions and services she had barely thought about before. She moved to a smaller apartment in a less expensive neighborhood, a cramped 2-bedroom where the children had to share a room, and the kitchen was so small she could touch both walls at once. But the reality was cruel and unforgiving. The savings were disappearing faster than she could track. How would she support 2 children alone? That was when the letter arrived. Elena's hands trembled as she read the expensive letterhead, the cold legal language that somehow managed to make cruelty sound civilized. Margaret Blackwood was filing for custody of her grandchildren, claiming that Elena was financially and emotionally unstable, unfit to raise them. The petition cited the alleged medical negligence as evidence of defective character, of poor judgment that endangered not just patients but her own children. They did not just want to destroy her career. They wanted to take her children. They wanted to take the only things that kept her alive, that gave meaning to her existence. She read the letter 3 times, unable to process what she was seeing. Each reading revealed new horrors, new accusations, new evidence that someone had manufactured. Reports from supposedly concerned neighbors, assessments from psychologists she had never met, a picture painted of a woman who was barely holding herself together, who was one bad day away from complete collapse. I will not let them. Nathan's voice was fierce when she called him, sobbing so hard she could barely form words. I will hire the best family lawyer in the state. I will prove that my mother is behind all of this. And if we cannot... Elena's voice was broken, raw with terror. What if I lose Emma and Ethan? Nathan came to her apartment within the hour. He held her as she crumbled, his own tears falling into her hair. You will not lose them. We are a family now. We fight this together. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. I am not leaving you again. But the situation continued to worsen. Child Protective Services began making regular visits to Elena's apartment, each one another invasion, another opportunity for Margaret's lawyers to find something to use against her. The caseworkers were professionally sympathetic but thorough, documenting everything from the small size of the apartment to the limited food in the refrigerator to the fact that Elena was currently unemployed. Victoria produced witnesses who claimed to have seen Elena neglecting her children, neighbors who supposedly heard screaming and crying at all hours, teachers who expressed concern about the children's welfare. Elena recognized some of the names as people she had never met, residents of buildings she had never lived in. Each lie was more elaborate than the last, each accusation more painful. The twins felt the tension even though their parents tried to shield them. Ethan, always cheerful and talkative, became quiet and withdrawn. Emma, already serious, barely spoke at all. They heard the whispered conversations. They felt their mother's fear, and they did not understand why the world was falling apart around them. Mommy, are you going to leave us? Ethan asked one night, his eyes huge and filled with tears. Never. Elena hugged both children close, her voice fierce despite its trembling. Mommy will never leave you. Never. No matter what happens, I will always be right here. But in the silence of dawn, when the children were asleep and she was alone with her thoughts, she feared it was a promise she might not be able to keep. Nathan worked tirelessly, barely sleeping, using every resource at his disposal. He hired private investigators who traced the payments Victoria had made to forge documents and bribe witnesses. He confronted his mother directly, their argument echoing through the halls of the Blackwood mansion, in a confrontation that had been years in the making. You are throwing away everything, Margaret had said, her voice like ice. For what? For a woman who will never be good enough for this family? For children who will be raised without understanding their legacy? They are my children. Nathan's voice was steady, his eyes blazing with an anger he had never before directed at his mother. And Elena is worth more than everyone in your social circles combined. She saved children's lives while you were attending charity galas. She raised our children alone while you were manipulating me with lies. I will not let you destroy them. Then you are no longer my son. Margaret's voice did not waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that her control was finally being challenged. Anger that her son was choosing someone else over her. If that is what it takes to protect my family, then so be it. Nathan walked out of his childhood home without looking back. The house where he had grown up, the empire his father had built, the future his mother had planned, all of it was behind him now. And for the first time in his life, he felt free. The day of the custody hearing dawned gray and rainy, as if the sky itself were crying for the injustice about to unfold. Elena wore her best navy suit, trying to look confident when inside she was nothing but terror. Nathan held her hand, his presence the only anchor in a sea of chaos that threatened to drown her. The courtroom was full of curious onlookers, journalists who smelled scandal, and in the back row, Margaret and Victoria, seated side by side with satisfied smiles that made Elena's stomach turn. They looked confident. They looked like women who were certain of victory. The lawyer Nathan had hired, David Chen, was legendary in Washington family law. He had won cases that everyone said were unwinnable. He organized documents with military precision and spoke with the confidence of someone who had fought and won impossible battles before. My client was the victim of a systematic defamation campaign and falsification of evidence. Mr. Chen's firm voice echoed through the courtroom as he began his opening statement. Over the next several hours, we will present irrefutable proof that the documents which led to the suspension of Dr. Mitchell's medical license were forged. The witnesses against her were paid for their false testimony, and this entire proceeding is the result of a conspiracy to steal children from a loving and devoted mother. He presented graphological analyses showing Elena's signature on the medical documents had been expertly faked. Testimony from real nurses who worked with her that night, contradicting the paid witnesses point by point. Bank records showing suspicious payments from Victoria to individuals who had testified against Elena. Documentation from the private investigators tracing the conspiracy to its source, complete with recordings and emails that proved deliberate intent. Margaret's lawyer, a woman with silver hair and predatory eyes who had built her reputation on aggressive tactics, counterattacked with everything she had. Dr. Mitchell is an unstable single mother, without a job and without prospects. She lives in a small apartment in a questionable neighborhood, barely able to cover her bills. She has no family support system, no financial reserves, no professional standing. My clients offer these grandchildren a life of comfort and opportunity that their mother simply cannot provide. Material comfort does not replace maternal love. Mr. Chen's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Mrs. Blackwood removed her own son from his children's mother 6 years ago through lies and manipulation. She destroyed a relationship and denied her own grandchildren the presence of their father for the first 6 years of their lives. Now she attempts to do the same thing again, to take children from their mother using the same tactics of deception and manipulation. Witnesses took turns on the stand. The twins' teachers spoke about well-adjusted and loved children who came to school happy and prepared. Elena's colleagues testified to her dedication and competence, to the hundreds of lives she had saved over her career, to her reputation as one of the finest pediatric surgeons in the region. Parents of patients talked about how she had helped their children when other doctors had given up hope. But Margaret's lawyer had prepared carefully and had deep pockets to fund her attacks. Dr. Mitchell abandoned her children for hours at a time, leaving them with inadequate supervision while she worked double shifts. We have reports from concerned neighbors, from school officials, from multiple independent witnesses who observed troubling patterns of neglect. Lies. All lies. But in the courtroom, with the judge watching sternly, each accusation seemed to tear pieces from Elena's soul. She held back tears, refusing to break down publicly, but inside she was shattered into more pieces than she could count. Nathan testified, his voice firm and clear as he described his mother's manipulation 6 years ago, his regret for believing her lies, and his absolute conviction that Elena was an extraordinary mother. He spoke of watching her with the children, of seeing her patience and love, of understanding now what he had missed for so long. But his words seemed insufficient against the machine of destruction that Margaret and Victoria had created. The evidence was overwhelming, even if it was false. The narrative was compelling, even if it was fiction. When the judge announced a brief recess, Elena fled to the bathroom and was sick. The fear was so physical, so visceral, that it consumed every cell in her body. She gripped the edge of the sink and stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed woman staring back at her. After the recess, David Chen rose with renewed determination. "Your Honor, I would like to present a final witness." The judge frowned, her silver-framed glasses catching the light. "The witness list has already been established, Mr. Chen. This is highly irregular." "I understand, Your Honor, and I apologize for the irregularity, but this witness volunteered just this morning. It is Emma Mitchell, 6 years old, daughter of the respondent. She wishes to speak on her mother's behalf." A murmur of surprise ran through the courtroom. Elena went pale, shaking her head desperately at Nathan. "No," she whispered. "I do not want to expose my daughter to this." But Emma was already walking through the courtroom doors, small and serious in her favorite blue dress with tiny white flowers. She looked at her mother with determination in her hazel eyes so like her father's. "Mommy," she said quietly, "I want to help. I want them to know." "Your Honor," Mr. Chen interjected quickly, "I suggest we hear the child in your chambers, away from the public eye. Just the presence of the attorneys and necessary parties." The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morrison, considered for a moment and then nodded. "Agreed. This is a sensitive matter. Counsel will accompany me." Minutes later, in a more private and welcoming office, Emma sat in a chair too large for her, her feet dangling above the floor. The judge, showing a gentleness that had not been visible in the courtroom, knelt to reach the girl's height. "Hi, Emma. Do you know why you are here?" "Yes." Emma's voice was small but steady, her serious eyes fixed on the judge's face. "Because those people want to take me and Ethan away from our mommy." "And you want to tell us something about your mommy?" Emma nodded solemnly. "My mommy works hard because she loves us. She gets tired sometimes, I can tell, but she always has time for us anyway. She helps with homework, even when she has to read the instructions twice, because she is so tired. She makes the best pancakes on Saturday mornings, with chocolate chips shaped like smiley faces. She reads stories before bed, all the voices, even the silly ones that make Ethan laugh." The judge listened, her expression softening. "When Ethan had a nightmare about monsters under the bed," Emma continued, "Mommy slept in our room for a whole week. She brought her pillow and blanket and slept on the floor so he would not be scared. She said she would protect us from any monster, real or pretend." The words were simple, but charged with truth that could not be manufactured or bought. David Chen watched the judge, seeing the impact on the woman's face. "That lady," Emma said, pointing in the general direction where Margaret was waiting in the courtroom. "She told me and Ethan that she would give us video games and trips to Disneyland and anything we wanted. But she never asked what we actually like. She does not know that I draw pictures of the ocean because I want to be a marine biologist when I grow up. She does not know that Ethan is scared of thunder and has to sleep with the hallway light on. Mommy knows everything about us. She knows us." "And your father?" Judge Morrison asked gently. Emma's face softened, some of her seriousness melting away. "Daddy is nice. He came later, but he is learning. He remembers things now, like that I do not like onions, and Ethan is allergic to peanuts. He and Mommy are happy when they are together. I can tell because Mommy smiles more now. Real smiles, not the tired ones. We are a family. If you could choose, Emma, where would you like to stay?" The answer came without hesitation, clear and certain. "With Mommy. She's the best mom in the world. She never gave up on us. Even when she was sad and cried at night when she thought I could not hear, she always told us she loved us in the morning. She always made us feel safe. Please do not take us away from her." Tears flowed silently down Elena's face as she listened through the partially open door. Margaret's lawyer tried to object, but her voice died against the devastating sincerity of a child defending her mother. "Thank you, Emma." Judge Morrison hugged the little girl briefly, a spontaneous gesture that spoke louder than any legal argument. "You are very brave, and very lucky to have such a wonderful mother." When they returned to the courtroom, the silence was heavy with anticipation. Emma ran to Elena, who wrapped her in a fierce embrace, no longer caring about appearances or dignity or anything except holding her daughter close. The judge returned to the bench with a grave expression. The courtroom fell into absolute silence, everyone holding their breath, awaiting the verdict. Elena held Nathan's hand with one of hers, and Emma with the other. Ethan was on Nathan's lap, confused by the tension but sensing its importance. "In my 30 years on the bench," Judge Morrison began, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "I have rarely witnessed such an elaborate and cruel legal charade as what has been presented in this case." Margaret's smile faltered. Victoria's face went pale. The evidence presented by the defense is irrefutable. The documents that led to the suspension of Dr. Mitchell's medical license were falsified. The witnesses against her were bribed. This was not a case of genuine concern for children's welfare. This was an orchestrated conspiracy to destroy the life and career of a dedicated mother for reasons that have nothing to do with the best interests of these children. Victoria started to rise from her seat, but her lawyer pulled her back down. More serious still, the judge continued, is the attempt to use this court, an institution designed to protect families, to remove children from a loving mother for purely vindictive and selfish reasons. The testimony of young Emma Mitchell was the most honest and moving testimony I have heard in 3 decades of family law. That child loves her mother with a depth and clarity that cannot be faked, and this mother has dedicated her life to the well-being of her children against tremendous odds and impossible circumstances. Elena sobbed, barely able to believe what she was hearing. Nathan pulled her closer, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. Therefore, I decree the following. Custody of Emma and Ethan Mitchell remains entirely and exclusively with Dr. Elena Mitchell. Furthermore, I order immediate criminal investigation against Margaret Blackwood and Victoria Ashworth for falsification of documents, bribery of witnesses, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud. I also instruct the Washington Medical Commission to re-examine Dr. Mitchell's case with the new evidence and strongly recommend the immediate reinstatement of her medical license. The final gavel sounded like liberating thunder. Elena collapsed crying into Nathan's arms while David Chen allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The twins hugged their parents without fully understanding what had happened, but feeling the wave of relief that washed over their family. Margaret and Victoria were escorted from the courtroom by officers of the court, their faces contorted with fury and humiliation. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing the downfall of 2 women who had tried to destroy a family out of pure malice and thwarted ambition. Outside the courthouse, the rain had finally stopped. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds as Elena stood with her children and Nathan, breathing freely for the first time in months. It is over, Nathan said quietly, his arm around her shoulders. We won. Elena looked at him, at the man who had returned to fight for her and their children when it would have been so much easier to walk away. The man who had defied his own mother, sacrificed his relationship with her, risked everything he had built to protect people he had only recently come to know. Yes, she said, and smiled despite the tears still streaming down her face. We did, but it was not quite over yet. There was more healing to do, more bridges to build, more trust to rebuild. 3 months later, the criminal trial concluded. Margaret Blackwood and Victoria Ashworth were convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Margaret received 5 years in federal prison. Victoria received 3. Their assets were partially frozen pending civil suits, their reputations destroyed beyond repair, their social circles evaporating like morning mist under the unforgiving light of day. Elena's medical license was reinstated with a formal and public apology from the Washington Medical Commission. She returned to Seattle Children's Hospital not as a disgraced doctor, but as a vindicated one, her colleagues welcoming her with genuine warmth and relief. The hospital offered her a promotion, a raise, and an office with a window overlooking the mountains. But the most important changes were quieter, more personal, happening in the spaces between the dramatic moments. Elena stood at her kitchen window, watching Nathan chase the twins through their new backyard in the house they had bought together in Ballard. It was not a mansion. It was a modest craftsman bungalow with a garden and enough room for the children to run and play. It had a big old apple tree and a porch swing and a kitchen where they could all cook together on Sunday mornings. It was perfect. You are staring again. She turned to find Nathan behind her, slightly out of breath from his game with the children, his smile wide and unguarded in a way she had never seen during their first relationship 6 years ago. He looked happy. He looked at peace. He looked like a man who had finally found what he was looking for. I am allowed to stare, she said. It is my house. Our house. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Our family. Through the window, she watched Emma carefully arranging flowers she had picked from the garden, while Ethan attempted to climb the old apple tree, inevitably getting stuck and needing rescue. Normal. Peaceful. Everything she had fought for. I have something for you. Nathan's voice was soft, nervous in a way that made her heart skip. She turned in his arms and found him holding a small velvet box. I almost lost you twice, he said, his hazel eyes searching hers. The first time because I was young and foolish, and let my mother poison what we had with lies I should have questioned. The second time because I was not fast enough, not smart enough to protect you from her schemes. I will not let there be a third time. He opened the box. A simple diamond ring caught the light, elegant without being ostentatious. Not a ring designed to impress, but a ring designed to last. Marry me, Elena. Not because of the children, not because of what we have been through together, but because I love you. I have always loved you, even when I was too stupid to fight for you, even when I believed lies that should never have fooled me. You were always there, in my heart, like a truth I was not ready to face. I am ready now. Elena looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, then at their children playing in the backyard of their home. Yes, she whispered, and then, stronger, with all the certainty she had been afraid to feel. Yes. 6 months later, the garden of their Ballard home was transformed into something from a dream. White and lavender flowers intertwined in delicate arches. Simple wooden chairs lined up to form an aisle, and at the end, under the old apple tree now heavy with summer fruit, Nathan waited in a simple gray suit, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Elena walked down the grass aisle, arm in arm with both twins. Emma carried the rings with ceremonial seriousness, her face grave with the importance of her duty. Ethan scattered flower petals with enthusiastic abandon, occasionally throwing them at giggling guests. She wore a simple cream lace dress, her dark hair loose in the warm summer breeze, and on her face was the peace of someone who had survived the storm and finally found safe harbor. Friends, neighbors, colleagues from the hospital, and grateful parents of patients witnessed the union. David Chen was there with his wife. Patricia and other nurses who had supported Elena during her darkest days stood in the front row, dabbing their eyes. The twins' teachers, Elena's sister Megan, all the people who had believed in her when belief was hardest. When Elena reached the apple tree, Nathan took her hands, his voice thick with emotion. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You raised our children alone when I should have been there. You fought for your career, your reputation, your family, when lesser people would have given up. You showed me what love really means. Not the easy love of youth and passion, but the hard love of forgiveness and second chances. Elena blinked back tears, squeezing his hands. I vowed to never let anyone hurt you again, but I know now that was the wrong promise to make. What I should have promised was this. I will stand beside you. Whatever comes, whatever storms try to break us, I will stand beside you and we will face them together. Forever and one more day. Elena smiled through her tears. Nathan, for 6 years I believed I was broken beyond repair. That the girl who loved you had died the morning I found your empty pillow and that cold note. But I was wrong. She did not die. She became stronger. She became a mother and a doctor and a survivor. And somewhere in that survival, without even knowing it, she was waiting for you to find your way back. She reached up to touch his face. You showed me that family is not perfection. It is presence. It is showing up, day after day, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when the easier path would be to walk away. It is fighting for the people you love, even when the odds seem impossible. I promise to choose you, to choose us, every day that I have left, in the difficult moments and the joyful ones. Forever and one more day. When they kissed, sealing promises that time would prove them both determined to keep. The twins applauded enthusiastically. Ethan made exaggerated gagging sounds that sent ripples of laughter through the guests, while Emma smiled quietly, her serious face momentarily dissolved by pure and uncomplicated happiness. The reception lasted into the golden afternoon. Soft music from a small band Nathan had hired. Animated conversations among guests who had become family. Abundant food and flowing champagne. Elena moved through it in a happy blur, accepting congratulations, watching Nathan dance badly with their children, feeling the warmth of community and love surrounding her like a protective embrace. As the sun began to set, painting the Seattle sky in shades of orange and pink, she found a quiet moment alone on the garden bench, watching her family from a distance. Happy? She looked up to find her sister Megan holding 2 glasses of champagne, her face soft with affection. Terrified, Elena admitted, accepting one of the glasses. Happy and terrified. What if this is all temporary? What if something else goes wrong? What if I wake up tomorrow and find out this was all a dream? Megan sat beside her. Something else will go wrong. That is life. Bad things happen. People get sick. People lose jobs. People struggle. But look at what you have already survived. Look at what you built from the ruins when you had nothing but determination and love. Whatever comes next, you are not facing it alone anymore. Elena watched Nathan lift Ethan onto his shoulders while Emma tugged at his hand, trying to show him something in the garden. Her family. Her impossible, improbable, hard-won family. No, she agreed quietly. I am not alone. Later that night, after the guests had left and the children had been put to bed in their room filled with glow-in-the-dark stars painted on the ceiling, Elena and Nathan sat on the garden swing, watching the real stars emerge one by one. Do you think they will remember all of this when they grow up? Elena asked, her head resting on his shoulder. I hope they remember that love is worth fighting for. Nathan kissed her hair gently. That family is a choice you make every day, not an accident of birth or circumstance. That forgiveness is possible. That happy endings exist, even after the storm, especially after the storm. Elena smiled, finally at peace in a way she had not been for 6 years, maybe longer. The life she had rebuilt brick by brick was complete. Not perfect. It never would be. Life was not meant to be perfect. But it was theirs, built on truth and forgiveness, and the promise that no matter what came, they would face it together. Forever, and one more day, she whispered. Forever and one more day, he echoed, sealing the promise with a kiss beneath the stars. And in the years that followed, that promise was tested and proven, again and again. Emma grew into a young artist whose paintings of ocean life hung in galleries across the Pacific Northwest. She won a scholarship to study marine biology at the University of Washington, fulfilling the dream she had whispered to a judge in a courtroom when she was 6 years old. Ethan became an aerospace engineer, who never lost his childlike enthusiasm for how things worked, eventually landing his dream job at Boeing, helping design the planes he had loved since that first visit to the factory with his family. Elena continued to save lives at Seattle Children's Hospital, her reputation fully restored and eventually elevated to chief of pediatric surgery. She trained a new generation of surgeons, passed on everything she had learned, and found joy in watching them grow. Nathan sold his shares in Blackwood Ventures and started a foundation that helped single mothers facing unfair custody battles, staffed by lawyers like David Chen, who believed that justice should not be available only to those who could afford it. The foundation grew, helping hundreds of families every year, turning the pain of their own experience into something that could help others. He never spoke to his mother again, though he heard through distant relatives that she had been released early for good behavior and was living quietly somewhere in Europe. Her empire dismantled, her influence gone, her name spoken only in whispers. Victoria simply disappeared from their lives, a footnote in a story that had moved far beyond her petty revenge. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Elena and Nathan renewed their vows under the same apple tree, now massive and covered with blossoms, with Emma and Ethan, now 16 and impossibly grown, standing beside them as witnesses. The same words, the same promises, but spoken now with the weight of a decade behind them, with the proof of 10 years of choosing each other, again and again, in small ways and large, forever and one more day. And when Elena looked at her family gathered in the garden of their home, at the life they had built from the ashes of betrayal and loss and heartbreak, she knew with absolute certainty that love had prevailed. Not the easy love of fairy tales, but the harder, truer love of second chances and forgiveness, and the daily choice to show up, to try, to believe that even the most broken things can be made whole again. This was her happy ending, not because everything was perfect, but because she had found the people worth fighting for. And they had found her. The end.